Hello, this is Professor Evans. This video was for the students of COP1000C, which is Intro to Programming Concepts at Valencia College in Orlando, Florida. In this video, we're going to do a couple of coding exercises related to Unit 3, which is Input and Output. So these are the learning objectives that you'll see as you work through your materials provided on MindTap. When you complete Unit 3, you should be able to identify input and output streams, read data from the standard input device, define the use predefined functions in a program, describe input stream functions like get, ignore, put back, and peek, write data to the standard output device, use manipulators in a program to format output, perform input and output operations using the string data type, and distinguish how to debug logic errors. So today I'm going to do two coding examples to help you understand some of the topics that are discussed within Unit 3. As you complete your programming exercises that are a part of your weekly assignments, you'll also get practice with more of the ideas that you see on the screen. So to begin this video, I'm going to switch over to our compiler and begin our first exercise. So I'm going to begin by opening a new file. And I'm going to add the program objective for this example. So this example is going to be a paycheck calculator. So we're going to begin by reading a worker's total hours and hourly rate of pay. And we're going to calculate the worker's gross and net pay. So keep in mind your gross pay is what you would get paid before taxes, and your net pay is what you would get paid after taxes have been taken out of your paycheck. So in order to complete this program, we have to deduct the required amount of taxes. In this case, we're going to use a given rate of 7.65% for FICA tax contributions. Okay, and finally, our result should be displayed in terms of dollars and cents. So we're going to learn about how to format the output of a float or double value so that it doesn't show more than 2 decimal places for this program. So now we have our program objective. Let's talk about our inputs, outputs, and our process. In this case, we're going to need to figure out the hours worked from the user and their pay rate. So these will be things that we will take from the user. Our outputs are going to be the gross pay and the net pay. Now let's talk about our process. How are we going to calculate the gross pay and the net pay? First of all, we can say that gross pay is going to just be equal to the number of hours worked by the employee times their pay rate. This is how we calculate gross pay. Hours worked times pay rate. In order to figure out the net pay, we have to figure out the amount of taxes that would be owed on the gross pay and then deduct it. So let's calculate that. The taxes are going to be 7.65%, so I'm going to convert that percent to a decimal, 0.0765, and I'm going to multiply that by the gross pay. That's going to tell me the amount of taxes that are owed. So then my net pay is going to be equal to my gross pay minus the taxes that are owed. So there's my process to figure out our two outputs, gross pay and net pay. Now let's begin our program. I'm going to pound include IO stream so that I have those input and output functions available to me. I'm going to add my namespace as well. I'm also going to go ahead and declare a constant for the FICA taxes. So in this case, I'm going to declare this as a double. I'm going to call it FICA. And I'm going to put that percentage right in there. Now, I'm declaring this as a constant so that if the tax rate changes from one year to the next, I only have to change my tax rate in one place within my program. And then as I rely on this value within my calculations, I know that it's going to transfer back to this definition of the constant at this rate. So if I were writing this program and I was going to be using the value for FICA taxes at, say, 50 different places within my code, well, let's say that in 2023 or 2024 or whenever, the tax rate changes. Now I have to go through every line of code and figure out everywhere that I used this number. Or I can declare it once as a constant, and then if I need to change it, I only have to change it once, right up here at the top of my program. Now I'm ready to start the main program. I'm going to go ahead and declare my variables. So I'm going to start with, get some space here. I'm going to start with hours worked, pay rate. Remember, those are my inputs from the user. I have to calculate the taxes, so I need a variable to store that value. And then I need my two outputs, which are net pay and gross pay. So there's my variables. Next, I'm going to collect the inputs I need from the user. All right, so here's where I ask the user to tell me the number of hours worked, and then I'm going to collect it inside of hours worked. Next, I'm going to enter the hourly rate of pay. And collect that. And now it's time to implement our process. So remember, our process has 3 steps: calculate the gross pay, calculate the taxes, and calculate the net pay. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste. Now in this case, remember that I defined this as a constant, so I'm going to just replace that with FICA. So we have gross pay equals hours worked times pay rate. Our taxes equals FICA times gross pay. Our net pay is the gross pay minus taxes. So when I copy this from my comments up above, the one thing I have to remember is just add semicolons at the end of each of these lines so that I don't get an error. And now we can output our results. Now, we want our results to be in the form of dollars and cents. In order to do that, we're going to use a function called setPrecision. And in order to use setPrecision, we need to include another library up here called IO_manip for IO manipulation. So in order to make sure that our output has exactly 2 decimal points, we are going to set it using setPrecision. So this line right here will make it so that when we output our data to the screen, setPrecision says set it so that the number of decimal points or decimal places after the decimal point is 2 places. So now we'll get the number of dollars and then number of cents by using this setPrecision function. So we're going to put that first, and then we're going to output our data. And by putting this first, it controls how the output will be shown on the screen, and it ensures that our output will have the format of dollars and cents with 2 decimal places. Oops, I forgot my quotes. All right, so we're going to say first the gross pay is. I'm going to put a $ within my text so that the number that is displayed after will have that $ in front, and it'll look like dollars and cents. Put my $ right there. And then we can end the program. So that completes our algorithm for implementing a paycheck calculator. Now we're going to go ahead and check for errors. Let's go ahead and save this. I'm going to call it Unit 3 Example 1 Paycheck. All right, 0 errors. And now I'm ready to run my code. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit the Run button. And now we can enter in our number of hours worked. Let's say that we are doing a week's worth of hours and we're going to do 40 hours this week. Let's say that my rate of pay is $16.25 an hour. There's my gross pay and my net pay. So we can see that our paycheck calculator is outputting both of the required outputs with the FICA taxes deducted for the net pay. I'm going to go ahead and do one more run. I'm going to do, let's say we do 100 hours worked at $10 an hour. We can see our gross pay, which is $1,000, and then we can see that 7.65% is taken out of the check, which comes to about $76 that is removed, and then we can see the net pay. So from this first example, we have learned how to do a multi-step process for calculating the output of data using some algebraic manipulation, figuring out the gross pay, the taxes, and then the net pay. And we've learned how to display the output of a float or a double so that you only have a certain number of decimal places. I could go back to that set precision function and change the number that we use to a different number. Let's say I wanted 5 decimal places or 1 decimal place, for example. I can use that set precision tool in order to do that. So now I'm going to end the program and move on to our second example. All right, so for our second example, we're going to write a program that's going to prompt the user to enter a date as a single line of input, and then we're going to parse through that data to display the day, month, and year on separate lines. So our program objective, we're going to prompt the user to enter the date in month, month, day, day, year, 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 year format. We're going to use a single input statement. So we're going to use a single input statement to accept the date, storing each piece of the date into an appropriate variable. Then we're going to demonstrate that the input was obtained correctly by outputting the month, day, and year to the screen. Here's what a sample output should look like. We're going to tell the user what to enter, and then the user will enter in a date. And hit enter on the keyboard. Then the output is going to look like this. So we know that we're going to accept a single piece of data from the user that looks like this. We've got some numbers, some slashes, and we're going to parse through that so that we can separate the month, the day, and the year into separate variables. So there's a number of ways that you could do this. I'm going to do this by showing you how to store the month, day, and year into characters, and to use the ignore function to skip over the slashes in the user's input stream. So our inputs are going to be month 1, month 2 to represent the 2 digits in the month. We have day 1 and day 2 to represent our 2 digits in the in the day. And then we have year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4 to represent the 4 digits in the year. So those are going to be the inputs that we're going to grab from the user supplying us this date. Our outputs are going to be the month, the day, and year, each printed on a separate line. And our process for this piece of code is we're going to store each digit of the date within a character, skipping the slashes provided in the input. So since we don't have a mathematic calculation here, our process is just going to describe how we're thinking about solving this problem and the steps we would take to get the desired output. So let's begin our program with our pound include statement and our namespace statement. All right, so let's go ahead and begin by declaring the variables we intend to use. In this case, my variables are going to be this inputs, and they're each going to be a character. Remember that a character stores one single value, like a letter or a single digit. It stores one value that is typed in from the keyboard. So we're going to store each digit within one of these character variables. Next, we're going to go ahead and get the date from the user. So we're going to ask the user to enter the date. And we're going to make sure we tell the user that we want it in this format. Now we're going to grab the month first. We're going to use a cin statement to get the month, like this. So keep in mind that because month 1 and month 2 are characters, only one character will be stored in each. And I can use the cin statement right here to basically grab the first 2 characters that the user types. So the first 2 characters should be the first 2 digits of the month, and I'm going to store those in month 1 and month 2. Now I need to skip the slash, because if I were to continue the cin statement, for example, I could add on to here day 1, but if I continue with this way, whatever the user types first will go in month 1, whatever they type second will go in month 2, and whatever they type third would go into day 1. Well, the third thing in our input is a slash. I don't want that. I want to ignore it. So let's use the ignore function so that we can skip over the slash and then continue grabbing our next piece of data, which would be day 1 and day 2. So I'm going to ignore slash in the input, and I'm going to use a function called ignore, cin.ignore. And I'm going to enter 2 pieces of information inside the parentheses. The first piece of information is the number of characters I want to skip. I could say 100, I could say 10, I could say 5, I could say 15. So the first number represents, it's an integer that represents the number of characters we automatically want to skip. In this case, I automatically want to skip just the next character, so I'm going to put 1. And then the second thing that you enter into this function is an alternative. So for example, I want to skip forward a certain number of characters, or I want to skip forward until I hit a particular character. So in this case, I want to skip forward until I hit the slash. So I'm going to tell it my second argument. So the first argument is go forward this number of characters. The second field here is your character expression. So either this will happen, either the first thing will happen, it'll skip over 1 character, or it will go forward until it hits a slash. Once it hits a slash, the next thing to be read will be the first character after the slash. So I could change this to any value I want. I could make it 100 or whatever I want, because ultimately, as soon as I hit the slash, I'm going to be ready to store the date. So again, our ignore function will ignore the next, I'm just going to say m characters, m meaning your first value here. That could be any integer. The next m characters or all characters until the character expression is reached. All right, so our first argument is the number of characters that will be ignored. Our second argument is the particular character that could be reached. So again, either one of these things can happen. So when we say cin.ignore. So I'm going to show by example why I'm going to use the number 100 instead of 1. So when I actually run this program, I'll show you why I left it as a 100. So with this statement, we've ignored the slash, and now we're ready to collect the date. Or the day, rather. Store the day. So now we can say cin day 1, day 2. So we've effectively skipped over the slash that the user entered, and we've grabbed day 1 and day 2 from what the user entered and stored it in these two variables. We're going to have to skip over the second slash again before we can get the year. So after we ignore the second slash, we'll store the year. And now we're ready to print the output. All right, so there's the month. I don't have to end the cout statement. I can just keep going with the next thing I want to print. I'm separating each line with this end line statement right here. All right, so that completes my cout statement where I display on the screen the month, day, and year entered from the user's input. Now I can end the program and begin testing. Just deleting extra lines here. All right, let's go ahead and compile. I'm going to save this as Unit 3, Example 2, date. All right, so I can see that I have 0 errors, and now I am ready to run the program. I'm going to come up here and hit run. All right, so we can now try to enter the date. So let's say I enter the date as March 15th, 1998. We can see the month, day, and year have been separated and printed on various lines. Now I'll do another run to show you why I decided to leave the number of characters to ignore in my cn.ignore statement as 100. Let's say that I type in 04192 as my month and 3689 or 4837 as my day and 1000, well, a 1 with a bunch of zeros and then a 1 at the end. I can see here that by leaving that CN statement with skipping 100 characters, what I did was I said skip 100 characters or skip forward to the next slash. So I still effectively grabbed the first 2 pieces of data from the user while discarding all the rest. So I left that 100 in there as an example to show what the cn.ignore function can do. So that's what I meant by either or. It will either skip the next 100 characters or it'll skip forward to that slash because that's what we programmed it to do. So this is the date program example where we can see how to manipulate and work with characters. There's more than one way to implement the program objective of this program. This is just one way. If you have another idea of how to implement the same program objective, I encourage you to try that out on your own. And that's going to conclude this video for Unit 3. Please email me if you have any questions. I'm happy to set up a Zoom meeting with you or answer questions via email if you need it. And I will continue posting a video for each unit of the course. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.